A widow stands on a road leaving the land of Moab. The wind kicks up red dirt, stinging her face. Her husband is dead. If you look at the ancient Hebrew word operating underneath these moments, at what actually happens in the dirt and the throne rooms of it is a covenant making itself visible in the dirt. It is the powerful absorbing the vulnerability of the powerless. It is a love that completely ignores the brokenness of the object and acts strictly on the integrity of the promise. But even this breathtaking moment in Jerusalem is just a faint echo. It is just a human king trying to act out a divine script. Because the ultimate revelation of this word does not happen in a palace. And it is not directed at a single crippled man. Human agreements are incredibly fragile. They require constant maintenance. They demand mutual effort. They survive only as long as both sides carry their weight. You sign the document. The black ink dries. You perform the labor. You receive the payment. If you stop performing, the payment stops. If you violate the terms, the contract dies. The relationship is entirely conditional. It is symmetrical. It is balanced. It is safe. But the divine love of the Hebrew Scriptures is profoundly unsafe. It is aggressively asymmetrical. When you trace this word through the ancient prophets, you see a terrifying pattern. God cuts a covenant with a nation. The nation immediately shatters it. They chase foreign gods. They build altars out of cold stone. They exploit the hungry. They abandon the widows. Ancient Near East. You start to see something the emotional reading completely misses. The defining love of the Hebrew Scriptures is not a spontaneous feeling. They snap the terms of the agreement like dry branches under heavy boots. They accumulate a moral debt they could not possibly repay in 1,000 lifetimes. By every legal standard of the ancient Near East, the contract is completely void. The ledger bleeds red. The offending party should be permanently wiped from the map. But the God of the Hebrews does not act like a regional deity. He does not behave like a local warlord collecting a grain tax. When the contract violently breaks, he does not walk away. He steps closer. He sends prophets. He sends severe warnings. He allows devastating historical consequences. But he never severs the root. This is not a weak tolerance of rebellion. It is a ferocious commitment to the relationship. Hesed activates precisely when the object of love becomes utterly unlovable. It is the emergency protocol of the divine nature. It kicks into gear exactly when the human partner completely fails. When Israel acts like a spiritual prostitute, Hesed pays the copper coins to buy her back. When the nation behaves like a violent child, Hesed refuses to let go of the hand. When the people are dragged by iron chains into a dark, suffocating exile, Hesed packs its bags and walks directly into the mud of Babylon right beside them. It is a stubborn, bleeding obligation. The real question of these stories isn't, how much did they care? It's this: what do you do when it is an entirely one-sided devotion? It is driven solely by the unbending character of the one making the promise, completely divorced from the failing performance of the one breaking it. But to understand just how foundational this asymmetry is to the very fabric of the universe, you have to see where it begins. You have to go to the exact moment God formally introduces His own character to humanity. You have to stand at the bottom of a violently shaking mountain. Thick, black smoke billows across the jagged peaks of Sinai. The ground vibrates continuously underfoot, shaking loose gravel into the ravines, and the thin air smells sharply of ozone and burning rock. Moses climbs the steep, treacherous incline, his muscles aching, carrying 2 blank slabs of heavy, cold stone in his arms. He is walking directly into the unshielded presence of the divine, and he is carrying an impossible weight of anxiety. Because just a few days earlier, the people waiting at the bottom of this mountain committed spectacular spiritual treason. They melted down their Egyptian gold, molded a statue of a calf, and threw a drunken festival, while the ink on their exclusive covenant was barely dry. Moses had shattered the first stone tablets in a rage. The contract is entirely broken. We measure the validity of love by how it makes us feel. When the feelings evaporate, we assume the love. The contract was broken before it even started. By every strict legal requirement of the ancient world, this newly formed nation deserves immediate, absolute destruction. Moses reaches the summit and stands in the crushing silence of the divine cloud, holding the blank stones, bracing for the execution order. Instead, a voice echoes against the granite walls. In Exodus chapter 34, verse 6, God passes in front of the exhausted prophet and speaks the most quoted sentence in the entire Hebrew Bible, providing the ultimate, definitive description of his own character. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. That English phrase, steadfast love and faithfulness, is our ancient fortress of vocabulary. Returning to the text, it is Hesed and Emet. This is the very first time in the scriptures that God explicitly defines his own nature to humanity, and he chooses his words with surgical precision. He does not introduce himself as a sterile judge weighing scales in a heavenly courtroom. He does not describe himself as a distant, philosophical architect who designed the cosmos and then retreated into the dark. He defines his very essence using the exact same fiercely loyal devotion that Boaz will one day use to rescue a starving widow from the dirt, has died. This is why so many of us walk around carrying a quiet, unshakable anxiety. We are terrified that if we stop performing, he defines himself as a God who unconditionally binds himself to broken people. This is not a temporary emotional disposition. It is the permanent operating system of the divine character. When God speaks, Hesed on the mountain, right after the golden calf rebellion, he is doing something legally scandalous. He is binding his own eternal, flawless reputation to a stiff-necked, rebellious, deeply compromised group of desert wanderers. He is publicly declaring that their spectacular failure will not dictate his fidelity. Their complete inability to hold up their end of the shattered stone contract will not stop him from honoring his promise. He is locking himself into a rescue mission that will eventually cost him a bloody cross in Jerusalem. The mountain establishes the cosmic reality of this love. But the real challenge is bringing it down into the valleys where we actually live. Because the tragic truth is, most of us walk through our daily routines entirely convinced that Hesed does not exist. We live in a world terrified of being dropped. We curate our images. We hide our weaknesses. We bury our failures. We polish our achievements. We measure our worth by the numbers on a screen, the balance in an account. We become too heavy to carry. If we have nothing left to offer, the people around us will simply pack up and walk away. The approval in a crowded room. We run on a treadmill of endless performance. The air is thin. The muscles ache. We are profoundly exhausted. This exhaustion is not a modern psychological trend. It is a theological crisis. We have projected the brutal ledger of the ancient world onto the character of the divine. We assume heaven operates on a strict transactional basis. We treat God like a cosmic employer. We punch the moral clock. We read the ancient chapters. We avoid the major sins. We drop coins into the offering plate. We expect the paycheck of security. And when we inevitably fail, when the moral discipline snaps, when the hidden addiction surfaces, when the marriage fractures, we assume the contract is instantly voided. We feel the heavy stone of anxiety in our chests. We lie awake, staring at the dark ceiling at 2 a.m. We hear the frantic vibration of a phone and immediately brace for bad news. We wait for the terrible silence of abandonment. We expect the executioner's sword. We expect God to pack his bags and walk out the door. Because that is exactly what we would do. We project our own fragile, weather-dependent affection onto the divine. We assume his devotion is as volatile as our own. We have built an entire society around the idea that love should be effortless, natural, and free from heavy demands. We think he is standing on the muddy bank, watching us drown in the freezing river, shaking his head at our poor choices. But Hesed shatters the phantom condition. It does not operate on your ledger. It does not fluctuate with your spiritual performance. It does not check your resume before it decides to act. It is aggressive. It is invasive. It is stubbornly attached. When you have absolutely nothing left to offer, when your hands are completely empty, when your spiritual bank account is bankrupt, that is exactly when the ancient fortress of vocabulary activates. The divine love is not a reward for good behavior. It is a rescue mission for the ruined. It is the wealthy landowner walking into the dirt of the barley field. It is the king pulling up a wooden chair for the crippled enemy. It is the creator standing on a burning mountain, binding himself to a nation that just committed treason in the valley below. But the weight of this word goes even further. It does not just stay in the ancient texts. It echoes forward, and it asks a final, quiet question about how you are living right now. A starving widow gleaned in a dusty field, and a landowner rewrote the laws of survival. But the ancient writers did not see the world that way. To find the answer, you have to start in a barley field just outside Bethlehem. A crippled heir shook on a cold stone floor, and a king pulled up a chair at the royal table. A rebellious nation danced around a golden calf, and a mountain echoed with a promise that refused to break. A fragile human contract demands a flawless performance, and a divine covenant absorbs the terrifying cost of failure. An ancient society built an unforgiving ledger of worth, and an aggressive rescue mission tore the ledger to pieces. A vulnerable people accumulated a debt they could never repay, and a relentless devotion paid the copper coins to buy them back. An exhausted world runs on a treadmill of endless anxiety, and a bleeding obligation steps into the mud to pull us out. Same word, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the 30 pounds of barley. 30 pounds of grain hitting the dirt floor, in a small house in Bethlehem. It was not just charity. It was the physical weight of a promise. It was the absolute, undeniable proof that someone strong had seen someone broken, and decided that their survival was now his personal responsibility. If you are in a season where you feel completely bankrupt, where you are terrified that your failures have finally voided the contract, a place where a starving widow is about to pick up grain from the dirt, entirely unaware, you need to look at the vocabulary of heaven. God is not standing on a clean riverbank waiting for you to swim. He is in the freezing water. His devotion does not require your perfection. It only requires your empty hands. If this opens something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to earn their place. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never walked away from a shattered covenant step into your deepest exhaustion and carry you home. That the man watching her is about to introduce one of the most dangerous words in the Hebrew language. Her 2 sons are dead. Her stomach is completely empty. She has no land, no legal protection, and no future in a world built for men. The ancient Mediterranean world is not built on romance. It is built on survival. When you read the texts of the ancient Near East, the baked clay tablets of Babylon, the fragile papyrus scrolls of Egypt, the weathered stone pillars of Canaan, you do not find societies obsessed with internal, emotional states. You find people obsessed with binding agreements. When a summer drought cracks the soil open and the wheat crop fails, a warm emotional attachment will not feed your starving children. You need a covenant. A covenant is not a casual promise. It is a formalized, blood-sworn relationship where 2 parties bind themselves to each other under penalty of severe violence. In the ancient world, you seal a covenant by cutting an animal in half. You walk between the bleeding, severed pieces. You swear an oath that if you fail to protect the other person, your own life will be forfeit. Your own blood spilled in the dirt just like the livestock. In this brutal, transaction-heavy environment, absolutely every relationship has strict conditions. The regional king protects the local village, but only if the village hauls heavy carts of grain tribute to his palace every harvest. The master feeds the servant, but only if the servant provides unbroken, exhausting labor under the burning sun. Everything is an exchange. She turns to the younger woman beside her, a foreigner who has absolutely no cultural obligation to stay, and tells her to go back home. The ledger must balance. If you stop producing, you stop being protected. If you lose your value, you lose your life. We are not so different today. Even if we dress our transactions in modern clothes, we still operate on the hidden assumption that our worth is entirely tied to our output. We assume we belong only as long as we are useful. But the Hebrew scriptures introduce a massive disruption into this ledger. The biblical writers needed a framework to describe a loyalty that goes far beyond the bare minimum of the law. They needed a way to articulate a commitment that refuses to walk away even when the other party is bankrupt, broken, or actively rebelling. They needed a word for a contract that survives the death of the other person's contribution. And the English language simply does not have an adequate equivalent. In your modern Bible, depending on which translation you have sitting on your desk, the translators try their best. They use words like loving kindness, or steadfast love, or mercy, or unfailing loyalty. But these English words fragment the original meaning. Loving kindness sounds like a polite sentiment on a greeting card. Mercy sounds like a sterile judge letting a guilty criminal go. Loyalty sounds like a grim soldier following a difficult order. The ancient concept is far heavier, but the younger woman refuses to move. This is not a scene about friendship. A few generations later, a crippled man is carried into it requires taking extreme personal risk for someone who has absolutely zero ability to pay you back. This devotion is not a spontaneous feeling. It is an aggressive, intervening act. And to see how aggressive it actually is, we have to leave the abstract world of covenants and go watch it happen in the dirt. We have to go back to that starving widow picking up barley scraps in Bethlehem and watch exactly what happens when a wealthy landowner decides the legal minimum is simply not enough. The sun beats down on the Judean hills. Dust coats her skin. Her hands are raw. Ruth bends down. She picks up a dropped barley stalk. She places it in a basket. She takes a step. She bends down again. This is gleaning. It is the absolute bottom rung of ancient society. It is the welfare system of the ancient Near East. The law dictates that landowners must leave the edges of their fields unharvested for the poor. It is survival. It is bare minimum provision. Then the landowner arrives. Boaz walks into the field. He sees the Moabite widow, and he does not just follow the law. He completely shatters it. He commands his harvesters to pull stalks out of the tied bundles, deliberately. He tells them to drop extra grain directly in her path. He offers her water drawn from his own well, royal throne room, in Jerusalem. His grandfather was the king's bitterest enemy. By every law of the ancient world, he should feel the cold steel. He invites her to eat roasted grain at his own table. He guarantees her physical safety among his workers. He gives her the privileges of an heir while she holds the status of a beggar. That evening, Ruth walks back into Bethlehem. She carries an ephah of barley, nearly 30 pounds of grain. She drops the heavy load onto the dirt floor. The older widow, Naomi, stares at the massive pile of food. The room goes entirely quiet. Naomi knows this is not normal charity. This is a deliberate intervention. And in Ruth chapter 2, verse 20, Naomi speaks a blessing over this man. She says, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead." The word your English translation uses for kindness here is the Hebrew Hesed. It appears nearly 250 times in the Old Testament. It is notoriously difficult for scholars to pin down. It encompasses loyalty, mercy, devotion, and steadfast love. But at its structural core, Hesed always requires a specific relational dynamic. It requires one person who is completely, desperately vulnerable, and another person who possesses the power to rescue them. Boaz owed Ruth absolutely nothing. She is a foreigner. She is a widow. She is an economic drain. Under the strict ledger of the ancient world, she has zero value to offer him. But Hesed moves beyond what is legally required. of an executioner's blade against his neck. Instead, the king orders a feast, pulls a wooden chair to the royal table, and hands him back. Hesed is not an emotion you feel in your chest. It is a rescue mission you launch with your hands. When Naomi sees the 30 pounds of grain hit the dirt floor, she recognizes the pattern. She recognizes that Boaz has enacted Hesed. He has stepped into the terrifying gap of their poverty and willingly bound himself to their survival. But this barley field is just a human reflection of a much deeper, more dangerous reality. Boaz is merely acting out a shadow, because Hesed is not primarily a human characteristic. And to understand the true anatomy of this word, you have to look at what it demands when the stakes are higher than a harvest. We are a society that treats love as a fragile, weather-dependent condition. The English language trains us to treat love as a passive noun, a sudden warmth in the chest, a biochemical reaction, an affection that washes over you when the right person stands in front of you. Because we view it this way, we inherently understand that it can vanish just as quickly. If the person changes, if the beauty fades, if the utility stops, the feeling evaporates like water on hot pavement. If the idea of a devotion that completely ignores your ability to produce is stirring a quiet relief in your chest, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. A lost fortune, same rhythm, same impossible devotion. Most people assume that when the Bible talks about love, it is talking about affection, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. The scholars who map the usage of this ancient word across fragile manuscripts notice a relentless structural pattern. In biblical Hebrew grammar, Hesed is almost never just a noun sitting still on a page. It is inextricably bound to action verbs. The text does not say that someone merely has this kind of love. The text says that someone does it, they perform it, they execute it, they demonstrate it through tangible, physical intervention in the material world. When you trace Hesed through the Psalms and the prophets, you frequently find it tightly locked together with another Hebrew word, emet. Emet translates to truth, firmness, reliability. It is the concept of a solid stone floor that will not crack under immense physical pressure. When the ancient writers weld these two concepts together, they are constructing a fortress of vocabulary. They are describing a disposition that is heavily armed and rigidly fixed. Hesed is not an emotional reaction to an attractive object. It is a covenantal commitment to a broken one. It is the unforced, voluntary adoption of another person's desperate crisis as if it were your very own. If you are drowning in a rapidly moving river, affection is the person standing safely on the muddy bank, weeping with deep, genuine empathy for your terrifying struggle. We read the ancient text through a very modern, very Western lens. We think of warm feelings, of an emotional state that ebbs and flows. But Hesed is the person diving headfirst into the freezing current, ruining their heavy clothes, and violently dragging your failing lungs back to the surface. It requires the stronger party to leverage their power, their resources, and their personal safety for the survival of the weaker party. It is an active rescue mandate. But the ultimate test of this devotion does not happen in a rural barley field, where the recipient is simply poor and hungry. The true weight of this word only becomes visible when you move from the farm to the capital city, because the most extreme demonstration of Hesed happens when the vulnerable person shivering in the room happens to be the crippled grandson of your sworn enemy. A heavy wooden door swings open in the palace at Jerusalem. A man is carried into the royal throne room. He cannot walk. His feet have been crippled since he was a child, shattered in a panicked escape years ago. His name is Mephibosheth. He is the grandson of King Saul. He is the direct heir of the man who hunted David through the burning deserts, who threw iron spears at his head, who obsessed over erasing David's name from the earth. By the brutal, unforgiving logic of ancient dynasties, a new king must eradicate the old king's bloodline. You wipe out the heirs. You salt the earth. You secure the throne. The crippled man falls on his face. His forehead touches the cold stone floor, depending on the weather of our circumstances. We treat love like a condition of the heart that simply happens to you. But if you look closer, the room is dead silent. He trembles, calling himself a dead dog, waiting for the executioner's steel to bite into his neck. But the sword does not fall. Instead, King David speaks a word that breaks the ancient ledger of violence. In 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1, David asks his court a question. Is there anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? The English text prints the word kindness. The Hebrew text uses Hesed. David is not feeling a sudden wave of pity for a broken man. He is remembering a covenant. Years ago, in a dusty field, David and Mephibosheth's father, Jonathan, cut a blood oath to protect each other's houses. Jonathan is dead. Saul is dead. The contract, by all normal human standards, has expired. The crippled boy has absolutely nothing to offer the king except political risk. But Hesed does not care about risk. David orders the royal guards to lift the terrified man from the dirt. He restores every single acre of his grandfather's lost empire. He commands the crippled heir to eat roasted meat and drink wine at the king's own table every single day for the rest of his life. He expects the blade. He receives the banquet. He expects an unmarked grave. He receives a royal estate. He expects the wrath of a rival. He receives the protection of a father. This is not a political pardon.